Hey everyone, James here from Wyshtech Airsoft. Today, we're going to be diving into something really exciting for all you MP7 fans out there. We're testing out the brand new Solink 42K RPM brushless motor for the VFC MP7. We'll be comparing against the stock OEM motor, gross, and running some performance tests and seeing if this upgrade is worth it for your build. So let's get into it and see what this little beast can do. Before we get into the nitty-gritty of this video, I just want to cover the motor itself before we have it all installed. The Solink 42K brushless motor is designed for higher performance with greater efficiency than your good old OEM brushed motor that's in these MP7s. I do like the quality of it. It's nice. The print on there, I really like that 11.1 42K RPM is visible on the side of it. Typically, manufacturers don't put that on there. They put some sort of code on the back, which I find super annoying. Warhead's guilty of this, and so is T238. They use the KV, which isn't bad. I could still have an easier time telling the difference, but I really wish they would just put the damn RPM rating of the motor like what Solink did here. So enough of that rant. So off camera, I ran into some installation complications. Part of the installation, when you go to put this motor in your MP7, this guy is on the brushed motor and you have to transfer it over. Additionally, you got to make sure it's in the right orientation because you can have it accidentally upside down. I just referenced off of the orientation of this guy to the positive because I planned on making sure that this motor sits in its motor cage with the positive on the top. The grub screw that pushes the motor into the bevel presses into the back of this guy. I had to make modifications. When you put this in your motor cage, it won't go all the way back like this one can. And here's why. The rails in your motor cage right here are too far forward. And if you look closely between the brushed motor and the brushless, you notice that gap right there is longer than this one. What ends up happening is that the brush motor can't go back far enough. What that gives you is absolutely no adjustability for where your pinion gear sits on your bevel. What I did to fix it is I simply milled the rails about 4 millimeters back. So this little gap right here, I milled it about 4 millimeters back to give me plenty of room to take the brushless motor and slide it all the way back like it's supposed to. But even after I did that, I still couldn't adjust it further back. The next thing that was preventing it from going all the way back as far as I needed it to was actually this guy. So it actually stuck out a little bit further. So I milled about 3 millimeters down to the point where it was almost flush with that little divot that you see right there. That divot right there is where your grub screw pushes in and centers the motor a little bit better, so it doesn't mess up your pinion to bevel alignment like this. So once I made that modification, I just slid it on there. And look at that, and I have all the room I need to adjust the brushless motor. Fun fact, I had to make step. I even had to grind into the screw here a little bit. And the reason being, it's actually going to sit right on top of the hop-up like this. And it's going to hit this part of the hop-up right here, right in front of the hop-up arm. So you could either modify the hop-up or make a relief on the motor so that it can slide a little bit further back to give you the proper motor height adjustment. And the reason why I chose to go with the step method is because that was honestly ended up being a mistake. So you see how I modified the screw? I didn't have to do that because that screw, if you look on the hop-up, hits the corner right here. So I could have just cut out a slot for that screw so I didn't have to modify the screw. So if you're doing this, just cut out the slot right here and just make sure that screw doesn't hit your hop-up arm, which it shouldn't because you barely need to take any material off. I would say about a couple millimeters and you'd be good. All right, for our first test, I'm going to be using a second MP7 with identical upgrades to the one that has the brushless motor in it, which is this guy. A quick preview. This is how it sits. The only difference between these two models is that this one is going to retain those cutoffs for the magazine. So the board here is the only thing that's different. Everything else is the same, aside from the obviously the brush motor, which we're going to test. I'll keep the guts out of both MP7s as it makes no difference in performance, and I could still use the magazine and shoot in the chrono using this method. Alright, so I've already got the OEM motor installed in this MP7. To make sure we're testing under the same conditions, I'll be pulling the spring out of this guy and putting the OEM, and then we'll test the OEM and put the spring from this guy back into this one. This way, we're keeping the load consistent as possible between both setups. Alright, pulling the spring out of the MP7 with the brushless motor, and I'm now putting it in the OEM motor MP7. For our first test, we're going to measure the amperage pull using this watt meter. It's Toolkit RC. This will give us an idea how much power the motor is drawing from the battery and to see how efficient the brushless motor is compared to the brush. We'll be running the test with this 7.4 LiPo battery only, because I've learned from previous builds that using an 11.1 LiPo in the MP7 can cause the rate of fire to increase too much, which will lead to jams and BBs exploding in the barrel due to poor tappet plate timing. Unfortunately, changing the nozzle length and barrel or bucking doesn't fix this issue, as I've spent hours trying different combinations of taking it apart, putting it back together. It's a lot of work. But anyways, let's get to testing this guy. So this is the micro switch that shoots these MP7s. So I'm going to hit that and we'll see how many amps we're pulling max. So it looks like we're pulling 22.9 amps. And if you want to get really technical, 172 watts. That is max. So I'm going to go and switch over to the other MP7 with the brushless motor, and we'll compare that amperage. The only thing we're looking for is how much of an amp difference there is. Alright, pulling the spring out of the OEM motor MP7, and now I'm putting it in the brushless motor MP7. And put in another watt meter. Here comes the battery. Okay. Gotta be really careful I don't touch. This micro switch is super sensitive. Even the lightest touch sets it off. Alright guys, moment of truth. I'm gonna do a burst just like the last test. 17.9 amps full auto. So that's about 5 amp drop compared to the brushed motor, which ain't bad. It sounds about the same rate of fire if you ask me, but we'll find out when we chrono it here in a little bit. As far as the amperage pull goes, usually I see a little bit more than that, somewhere in the neighborhood of half the amperage draw, but nonetheless it's still dropped off a bit. So that's going to make the battery last longer because it's not pulling as much power. So I'm going to go ahead and get ready to chrono these guys. We're going to chrono with the stock motor first on this guy, and then we'll go to this guy using the same spring. Before we get to chronoing, I just want to shout out to Solink for sending me this brushless motor to do tests on and show you guys the performance difference between going OEM and of course the brushless motor. I also want to give a shout out to Michael G from South Dakota for using his MP7 right here, which is what the brushless motor version is going into. So thanks for that, man. I really appreciate your support. Let's get to the nitty-gritty and get on over to the chrono. Alright, so for the chrono we're going to be using these exact 20 gram BBs and a magazine with the original follower inside, that good old 3-piece. And I'm going to be using this Bullgear electric speed loader to fill up the magazine. And she full. If you guys are curious about this speed loader, I'll leave a link down below. Got the brushed motor ready to go, and here's the magazine. I actually have to flip this guy upside down. I gotta two-hand it. So I gotta hold it like this. Okay, so I'm just going to do full auto so we can see the rounds per second, because that's really what's going to make a difference with this thing. Okay, here we go. 14.8 rounds a second all the way down the line, and getting about 360 FPS for those who wanted to know what the FPS is. It's averaging about 361 with those two O's. All right, so now I'm going to go ahead and swap over to the brushless motor and see if we get a better fire rate. All right, got the brushless motor MP7 ready to go. If you guys hang out till the end of this video, I'll show you what the rounds per second is on full auto between the two. All right, here we go. Looks like we did gain some rounds per second there, boys. Now we're up to 17 rounds a second. And this one's getting a little better seal than the other one is, so I'm going to have to look into that. But other than that, there you go. Not only we dropped in amps going to the brushless motor, but we also gained rounds per second as well. So that's a double whammy right there. Got the 11.1 hooked up. This is a Boss LiPo. Here you go, guys, as promised. This is the brushless MP7. Just below 30 rounds a second. And it actually didn't jam. It's probably like right there from jamming. Alrighty, tighty, lefty, loosey. Okay, so what's the final verdict on this Solink 42K RPM brushless motor for the VFC MP7? In short, I'd say it's a pretty solid upgrade, but it's hard to justify the cost of this thing, what's shown here in this screenshot right from the Solink website. The motor did perform really well in the test that we just did, so if you want to push your MP7 to the next level, this motor is definitely worth considering if you got the money. Just like any brushless motor, they're pretty expensive, given that these MP7s are already expensive right out of the box. But as always, make sure it suits the specific build and playing style. Because like I said before, 11.1 LiPo with either motor can cause issues in the stock configuration. I figured out a way to minimize that as much as possible. With that being said, thanks for watching, and if you found this video helpful, make sure to hit that like button, and don't forget to subscribe for more in-depth airsoft tech videos. If you got any questions or thoughts on the Solink motor, drop them down in the comments below, as I'd love to hear what you guys think. Until next time, guys, keep on teching, stay safe out there, and I'll catch you on the next one. Adios.